the shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and the things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
Welcome back to the shadow frequency, where the static gets a little colder, the room gets a little darker, and sometimes the thing you're most afraid of is the thing that never makes a sound. I'm Juniper, and tonight feels like one of those nights where you turn the hallway light on for no reason, then pretend you were just going to the kitchen anyway. I pulled tonight's episode from the stack, and I'll be honest, this one has a nasty little chill to it. Tonight we're talking about the Rake, the silent thing at the edge of sleep. This is the legend of a pale, crouching, human-like figure said to appear in bedrooms, along lonely shorelines, near old ships, in the corners of houses, and in the private dark where people are most vulnerable. But the Rake isn't terrifying only because of how it looks. It's terrifying because, according to the stories, it doesn't always kill right away. Sometimes it simply appears, and after that, the witness starts to change. There are claims of old maritime sightings, rumors of hidden records, and one especially disturbing alleged note from 1964 written by someone who believed the creature had stopped stalking their home and started living inside their mind. Chris, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of a monster that doesn't chase you but just waits for you to notice it?
That's the part that gets me, June. Most monsters make some kind of bargain with the imagination. They run, bite, howl, scratch, something like that. But something that simply sits there and watches you, that feels worse somehow. It's like it already knows the ending.
Exactly, it's the patience that makes it ugly. A monster in a hurry is scary. A monster with all the time in the world is something else entirely. Matt, what about you? When you look at the Rake, do you see a modern internet nightmare or something older wearing a new name?
I think that's the uncomfortable question. The name may be modern, but the fear is ancient. The thing at the foot of the bed, the thing just beyond the lantern light, the thing you can feel before you can see it. People have been afraid of that for as long as we've had darkness.
And that is why tonight's file feels dangerous, not because it gives us a clean answer, but because it points us towards something people recognize before they understand why. And with that, Matt, the record is yours.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson, produced by Juniper Ravenwood, with Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper, and I'll tell you right up front, tonight's file has that awful feeling of something you don't want to name too loudly. The Rake is one of those figures that seems simple at first: pale skin, long limbs, no hair, crouched posture, eyes that catch what little light the room gives it. But once you step past the drawing board monster shape, the legend gets stranger. It's not just a creature in the woods. It's not just a thing outside the window. It is the thing that appears when a person is alone, half awake, when the room is quiet enough that every click in the wall sounds like a fingernail. The earliest stories most of us know place it near beds, beside staircases, at the edge of forests, or crouched in corners where a person could swear nothing had been a second before. And the really unsettling part is not that it attacks. The really unsettling part is that sometimes it does not. Sometimes it simply lets itself be seen, and that is when trouble begins, like a door opening inward in the dark. The first classic version of the encounter goes something like this. A person wakes up in the deepest part of the night, not because of a crash or a scream, but because the body knows something is wrong before the mind catches up. The room feels too still. The air seems held in place. At the foot of the bed, or beside it, or sometimes just outside the bedroom door, there is a pale shape folded low to the floor, human enough to trigger recognition. wrong enough to make that recognition turn sour. It is not built like an animal, but it does not hold itself like a person either. Its arms seem too long. Its spine seems too flexible. Its head tilts with the slow patience of something that has done this before. And then comes the detail that runs through so many Rake stories. The witness does not feel hunted in the normal sense. They feel studied, as if the creature is learning the room, the breathing, the fear, the private rhythm of a life, and then quietly taking that information away with it. Now I'm pulling something out of the file here, and the item on top here is not a dusty relic from a museum. It's a printed copy of the modern Rake text as it circulated online, the kind of page somebody might have saved because it felt too specific to throw away. The margins are marked in pencil and several lines have been underlined, references to old accounts, hidden records, sightings that supposedly go back centuries, and a strange pattern of witnesses who did not simply report a monster and move on. They unraveled. That is the hook that separates the Rake from a basic campfire creature. The sighting is only the beginning. Afterward come the dreams, then the sounds, then the feeling that the thing is near even when there is no physical way it could be. People in these accounts wake up again and again at the same hour. They check locks they know are locked. They see pale movement in reflections. They start sleeping with the lights on, then stop sleeping at all. And the creature becomes less like an intruder and more like a thought that has learned how to breathe. That brings us to the old coastal layer of the legend, the so-called mariner's logs. We have to treat them as part of the lore, but within that lore, they are some of the creepiest pieces on the table. The story says that sailors, dock workers, and coastal families recorded sightings of a thin, pale figure near the water, especially during heavy fog. Imagine a deck at night, wood damp with salt, a lantern swinging just enough to make shadows crawl, and one crewman looking toward the bow and seeing something crouched where no man should be able to crouch. Not standing, not hiding, perched, waiting. When someone called out, the thing would vanish into fog or slip over the rail without a splash. But after the sighting, the witness changed. He would refuse to sleep below deck. He would insist the thing had followed the ship, even when land had disappeared behind them. He would hear scraping along the hull, whispering in the rigging, and footsteps where no footsteps could be, until the whole vessel felt less like transportation and more like a floating room with something waiting outside the door. And that maritime angle gives the Rake a different flavor, because the sea has always been a place where records blur. A man can disappear overboard and leave only a line in a logbook. A captain can remove a disturbing entry because panic spreads quickly in close quarters. A coastal village can bury a story because nobody wants to be known as the place where men started seeing pale things in the rocks. In those alleged accounts, the creature is almost never described as roaring or charging. It is described as watching, crouched on wet stone, folded beneath a pier, seen for 3 seconds at the edge of a lantern's reach, and then later the witness begins to fixate. That word matters, fixation. The Rake legend is built around the idea that seeing it gives it a place to live. Maybe not in the house, maybe not under the bed, maybe in the mind itself, where every shadow can become a second sighting and every silence becomes a sound waiting to happen. So when people talk about the Rake as a silent predator, I think that word silent is doing a lot of work. It is not silent because it is weak. It is silent because noise would almost be a mercy. A growl tells you where the danger is. A footstep tells you it is moved. A scream tells everyone else something is wrong. But silence isolates the witness. Silence makes the whole experience feel private, almost intimate, like the creature has chosen one person and does not need anyone else to believe. That is why this legend sticks to the ribs. It suggests a monster that does not just cross distance, it crosses a boundary. It moves from shoreline to bedroom, from sighting to nightmare, from folklore to obsession. And if the old stories are right, once you notice it watching you, the next question is not where it went. The next question is whether it ever truly left. That's where the first half leaves us, with a creature that may not need to break a door when it can simply get inside your thoughts.
That is such an awful idea. The rake doesn't just haunt the room, it teaches the room how to haunt you.
And the patience of it is what bothers me. Anything that waits, that quietly already feels like it knows more than we do.
After the break, we'll move into the alleged 1964 note, the blackout theory, and the one rational angle we have to keep on the table. Juniper and Chris, I'll send it over to you.
The rake does not need to break down the door to enter your life. Sometimes all it has to do is stand where the moonlight ends and wait for you to notice.
So far, the rake feels less like a creature and more like a slow infection of fear. You see it once, and suddenly every room you enter has a corner you don't quite trust. And I wonder what all of you are thinking right now. Is the rake just a story that found the perfect shape? Or is it a new name for something people have been seeing for a very long time? Chris, take it from here.
Thanks, June. I'll be honest, this one has me looking over my shoulder a bit, because the rake isn't the kind of monster that bursts through the wall. It's worse than that. It waits until the house is quiet and lets your own imagination do some of the heavy lifting. And while we're all trying not to picture that pale thing at the foot of the bed, this is a good time to remind everyone to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. It really does help the algorithms find the show and push these strange little transmissions out to more people. You can find The Shadow Frequency on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and all the major podcast directories. And don't forget shadowfrequencypodcast.com, where you'll find every episode, the companion blog, merch, show notes, and links to every platform. You can also support the show by buying us a coffee right there on the website. And if you've got a strange story, a creepy question, or just want to say hello, reach out through the website by email or voice message. You might hear yourself on a future episode. June, I'll send it back to you before I start checking under the studio desk.
Thanks, Chris. And now it's time to wake up the spectral cosmic message materializer. Let's flip the switches. The glass is fogging over. The little needle is trembling like it heard something behind it. And here we go. Something is sliding through the static tonight.
Message retrieved from the void.
Looks like a note from across the water. Let's unfold it carefully and see what kind of shadow it dragged in with it. This one comes from Morton in Manchester, England, and Morton listens through the website. He writes, I usually listen through the website late in the evening while I'm puttering around in the garage. I've got an old workbench out there, a radio I keep meaning to fix, and about 12 coffee tins full of screws I will probably never short properly. Your show is perfect company when the street goes quiet and the garage light starts making every shadow look suspicious. I'm especially into the cryptid episodes and the hauntings. There's something about those stories that make ordinary places feel like they're hiding a second version of themselves. Keep the corners quiet. Morton in Manchester. Morton, first of all, 12 coffee tins full of screws may be the most real garage detail anyone has ever sent us. And I love the phrase, a second version of themselves, because that is exactly the feeling we chase on this show. The familiar place that suddenly seems to have another layer beneath it. Thanks for listening through the website, and thank you for sending that in. If anyone else wants to reach us, you can send us a note at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. We love hearing from where you listen and how you found us and which strange corners of the paranormal keep calling you back. And now, speaking of strange corners, let's turn it back over to Chris for a little shadow news.
Thanks, June. Morton sounds like my kind of listener. Anyone who can listen to the rake in a quiet garage at night has stronger nerves than I do. The long-awaited release of government UFO files is now officially underway. The Department of War says it has posted the first batch of declassified UAP records at war.gov/UFO, with more releases planned on a rolling basis in the weeks ahead. Officials say the archive pulls material from agencies including NASA, the FBI, and the intelligence community. But they also caution that many of the newly posted files are unresolved cases, not confirmed proof of anything extraterrestrial. June, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Chris, and that fits tonight in an odd way, doesn't it? Files, records, released documents, unresolved cases. The idea that somewhere tucked inside an archive there might be one line that changes the whole story. And that brings us right back to the Rake, because in the second half, Matt's going to take us into the alleged 1964 note, the blackout theory, and the uncomfortable possibility that some stories spread because people can't stop telling them, and some spread because something wants them told. Matt, take us back in.
Some monsters kill quickly, but the oldest fears no patience. They sit at the edge of sleep and let your own mind do the damage.
Thanks, Juniper, and Morton's email fits perfectly tonight because garages, workshops, basements, spare rooms, those are the places where your mind starts filling in the corners once the rest of the house goes quiet. And Chris, that UFO Files story has the same strange pressure point as the Rake, the idea that there are records somewhere, documents tucked away, pages that might explain what people have been whispering about for years. With the Rake, the most disturbing alleged record is the 1964 note, usually described as a final message from someone who believed the creature had moved past the stage of being seen. In the story, the writer begins almost calmly. They describe the first encounter as if they are trying to convince themselves it was a mistake. A pale shape near the bed, a face too close to human, a silence that felt deliberate. But as the note continues, the language changes. Stops sounding like a report and starts sounding like a person trying to hold a cracking wall together with bare hands. And here in the file, I've got our second item. It's a printout from a modern sleep research article about sleep paralysis and what researchers call intruder hallucinations. I'm going to use it carefully because this is one grounded angle we owe the story. People really do wake up unable to move. People really do sense a presence in the room. Some see figures near the bed, hear sounds, feel pressure, or experience the absolute certainty that something is watching them. That does not mean every story is solved, and it definitely does not explain why the Rake image feels so precise to so many people. But it gives us something to chew on. Maybe some Rake encounters are the brain caught between sleep and waking, projecting fear into a shape. Maybe the oldest bedroom monsters were never imported from outside at all. Maybe they rose out of the body's own frozen panic, wearing whatever face the culture had ready for them that night. And maybe that is why these accounts can feel both unreal and painfully familiar, because the witness is not inventing fear, the witness is trapped inside it, staring at a shape the mind insists has teeth. But the 1964 note as legend takes a darker turn than a single sleep event. The writer supposedly stops talking about one sighting and starts talking about being noticed. That is an important distinction. They do not say, "I saw it again," as much as they say, "It knows where I am." They hear movement in rooms they just checked. They begin avoiding mirrors because reflections seem delayed by half a heartbeat. They sit with their back to a wall. They mark the hours when the house gets too quiet, and the creature becomes almost ceremonial in its patience. No chase, no dramatic attack, just the feeling of a presence applying pressure, night after night, until the victim begins to participate in their own haunting. That is what makes the Rake so nasty as folklore. It does not merely invade a room, it teaches the room how to betray you. A hallway becomes evidence. A closet becomes a witness. A bed becomes the one place you are too exposed to stay and too exhausted to leave, which is a cruel little trap. Then there is the blackout theory, and this is where the legend starts wearing a conspiracy coat. The claim is that authorities, institutions, ship captains, doctors, maybe even media gatekeepers suppressed references to this thing for centuries. On the practical side, we can understand why that idea spreads. Hidden records make a monster feel older. A missing page is sometimes scarier than a full confession. A government file cabinet, a hospital archive, a ship's log with a page cut out. Those images give the listener a reason to lean closer. But the more chilling version is this. What if silence was not simply about avoiding panic? What if silence was containment? What if the story itself is part of the creature's reach? The Rake is a monster of attention. You hear the name, you imagine the posture, you picture the pale shape at the foot of the bed, and now the pattern has a doorway into your mind. Maybe the blackout was never meant to hide the creature from people. Maybe it was meant to hide people from the creature. That is why the Rake endures, even with its modern fingerprints all over it. It behaves like something ancient because it plugs into a fear that predates the internet, predates electric lights, predates locks on bedroom doors. The fear is not just death, it is observation. The fear that something sees you when you are unguarded. The fear that your safest room is only safe because you have not looked in the right corner yet. So tonight we can hold both thoughts at once. We can say the Rake, as a named figure, belongs to the digital folklore age. We can also say the thing it represents is much older. The bedside watcher, the pale intruder, the silence that has weight. That may be why people keep adding supposed old documents to it. Mariner's notes, hidden letters, psychiatric fragments, final confessions. Folklore does that. It builds a skeleton out of rumors and then asks us why the bones look familiar. And maybe that is the real reason the legend feels dangerous. Not because it proves a creature is crawling through the world, but because it reminds us how little it takes for the world to feel crawled through. One shape in the dark, one bad dream that repeats, one story you wish you had never heard. And suddenly, when the lights go out, the room seems to be listening. So maybe the Rake is not a creature waiting in every dark room. Maybe it's worse than that. Maybe it's the reason the dark room feels occupied.
That's the thing with this one. Even if you tell yourself it's folklore, you still know exactly where it would be standing.
I hate how true that is. The corner, the doorway, the foot of the bed. Everybody has a place in their house where this story knows how to sit.
And that may be the final shape of the Rake. Not proof, not certainty, not a solved case, just a pale idea crouched at the edge of sleep, waiting to see whether we look back. Juniper, take us home.
Maybe the blackout was never about hiding the Rake from us. Maybe it was about keeping us from calling it closer.
Tonight, we followed the Rake through bedroom shorelines, alleged mariner's logs, whispered blackout theories, and one deeply unsettling idea that some monsters don't need to attack us to hurt us, they only need to be seen once. Whether the Rake is a modern internet legend, an old fear with a new name, or something stranger that keeps finding its way into our stories, it has earned its place in the dark little archive here at the Shadow Frequency. Thanks for joining us tonight. If you got a story, a theory, or a strange little note drifting through your own static, send it to shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. And don't forget about our website, shadowfrequencypodcast.com, for episodes, our blog, merchandise, show notes, links to all the platforms. You guys want to say goodnight?
Good night, everyone. And if you hear something moving around after the show tonight, just remember, it's probably the house settling.
Good night, everybody. Keep the lights on if you need to, and don't let anybody tell you there's shame in checking the hallway one extra time.
Good night from all of us here at the Shadow Frequency. Sleep well, keep your doors locked, and if something pale is waiting at the edge of sleep, maybe don't let it know you've noticed.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and your entertainment.